These days, we expect personalization in our tech, in our clothes, in our care. When you get glasses, they don't hand you small, medium, or large. They match your exact prescription. Even dentistry has shifted to fully custom crowns and implants, scanned and printed to fit just one person. Not because the old versions didn't work, but because personalization isn't a luxury anymore. It's the new standard. And yet in orthopedics, we haven't made that shift. Our surgical techniques have advanced. Recovery times are shorter, robots guide our cuts, 3D plans map every angle. But the implants, still built on sizing charts, still pulled from trays, still designed to fit a population, not a person. Even the best ones, even the most advanced. And why? Because the design philosophy hasn't changed. We keep making the patient fit the implant instead of making the implant fit the patient. This won't be the first time surgery had to rethink what standard really means. When laparoscopy first emerged, a lot of surgeons resisted. The outcomes with open surgery were already good. The techniques were reliable, the economics made sense. Why switch? In fact, when German physician Kurt Sem performed the first laparoscopy appendectomy in the 1980s, many of his peers called it unethical. He was mocked. One medical society even tried to ban the procedure entirely. But the data spoke. Smaller incisions, fewer complications, faster recovery. Laparoscopy didn't replace open surgery because open surgery failed. It replaced it because it was better for the patients. And by the early 1990s, it wasn't the alternative anymore. It was the standard. Orthopedics is standing at that same edge today. Because while our tools evolved, the design philosophy behind our implants didn't. And that gap is starting to show. The current system works. In many cases, it works incredibly well. In total joints, success rates are between 85 to 95%. But with millions of procedures a year, that remaining 5 to 15% is no longer small. It's tens of thousands of patients every year whose outcomes fall short, not because the technique failed, but because the system never gave them a perfect fit to begin with. This episode isn't about criticizing modern orthopedics. It's about rethinking what we ask from our implants and the system as a whole. What if the next evolution isn't about better trays, but no trays at all? What if the future isn't about picking the closest size, but designing the only one that fits? This is Unstandardized, Built for One, Episode 5, Custom Implants Built to Fit. Let's get into it. Before we talk about custom implants, we need to understand what we've already tried. Because orthopedics didn't ignore variability, it just tried to solve it in a different way. The answer was modularity, not personalization, but configurability. The idea started in Russia in the 1960s with a surgeon named Konstantin Salvage. He created the Salvage stem back in 1956, one of the first designs to separate fixation from biomechanics. By 1967, he introduced a proximally modular sleeve, allowing surgeons to adjust offset, rotation, and limb length, independently of how the implant fixed into bone. By 1971, U.S. Surgical licensed the stem. In 1974, engineers Doug Noyles and Fred DiCarlo added their own refinements, a Morse taper, a distal coronal slot, and a fluted distal fixation. By 1975, it had evolved into the SRN, Savage Rusin Noyles prosthesis. A few years later, Joint Medical Products launched the SROM, Savage Range of Motion, and it defined modularity for decades. It let surgeons rotate the proximal sleeve, adjust offset and length, and achieve diphysial fixation without compromising joint biomechanics. It was versatile enough for complex femurs and reliable enough for standard primaries. By the time DePuy Orthopedics acquired the design in 1990s, it had already become a workhorse. And it still is today, with well over 150,000 implants placed worldwide. And modularity didn't stop at the hip. It spread everywhere. Modular tibial trays to handle slope and bone loss, convertible shoulder stems that switch from anatomic to reverse without removing the stem, the glenoid augments for posterior wear, dual mobility and modular acetabular liners for stability. These were real advances. They made tough surgeries doable. They saved revisions. They gave surgeons more control. And most of them work exceptionally well today. They've stood the test of time. But even at their best, modular systems are still catalog of parts. You're still choosing from options, not creating something unique. A glenoid wedge might restore tilt, but it doesn't exactly replicate native curvature. A convertible shoulder might save time in revisions, but it's still built for most, not for one. One thing I would be remiss to note for those orthopods out there, if you want to see how this philosophy of modular implants evolved, the bold designs, the failures, the breakthroughs, the Yale University Library has a remarkable exhibit on the rise of modularity, including the SROM and its competitors. If you're nearby, you can see it in person. If not, there's a link in the show notes. Modularity gave us more control, but it never gave us true personalization, because no matter how many parts you add, you're still adapting the patient to the implant. Maybe it's time we do the reverse. Maybe it's time we stop assembling and start designing. Because one area of orthopedics was about to take this approach and turn it into a symbol of what custom could do, the acetabulum. Custom implants weren't born in an R&D lab. They were born out of necessity. In the 1970s and 80s, orthopedic oncology was changing fast. Multi-agent chemotherapy and advanced imaging meant fewer amputations and more limb salvage. But that created a new problem. When you resect half the pelvis, a shoulder girdle, or an entire femur, there's no off-the-shelf part for what's left behind. Surgeons tried bulk allografts, massive donor bone, shaped and fixed into place. Sometimes they worked, but oftentimes they failed. Fractures, infections, resorption, or non-union. The next step was modular tumor prosthesis. Interchangeable cylindrical segments of metal bolted together to span the defect. They gave immediate stability and allowed earlier weight bearing, a leap forward at that time. But still standardized shapes trying to fit unique, irregular anatomy. And standardized doesn't fit catastrophic bone loss. So surgeons and engineers started designing implants one patient at a time. These weren't just hips. Entire femurs were replaced with one-off designs. Custom tibial segments were built for children with growth plate tumors. Unique knee components were integrated directly into tumor megaprosthesis. Scapular and clavicle replacements were built for shoulder girdle resections. Even partial hand, foot, rib, and spinal elements were designed, one at a time, for one patient only. At first, the work was often done at the hospital level. Surgeons partnered with local engineers or small machine shops to build the parts they couldn't buy. The Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital in the UK worked hand in hand with Stanmore Implants to deliver these one-off solutions. In the United States, Hospital for Special Surgery built an internal design capability, pushing early CAD workflows for highly personalized implants. And they weren't alone. Companies like Stanmore in the UK, Implant Cast in Germany, and Materialize in Belgium quietly built reputations for one-off oncology and revision solutions, while focusing on digital planning and patient-specific surgical guides. These efforts proved custom implants could be done, but they all shared one limitation. They stayed niche, slow, expensive, often crude by modern standards. But they allowed reconstruction that otherwise meant amputation or permanent disability. And it wasn't just oncology. Trauma surgeons faced similar challenges: high-energy open fractures, chronic infections, failed implants leaving irregular segmental defects. Traditional biologic solutions, Ilizarov distraction osteogenesis, induced membranes, vascularized bone transfers, could work, but they required months or even years of treatment and couldn't quickly restore full joint anatomy. So trauma borrowed from oncology. Custom metallic implants, designed directly from patient imaging, became part of the limb salvage playbook. By the early 2000s, these workflows had matured. Hospital-based design expertise, partnerships with small engineering firms, and early digital imaging allowed regular use of one-off implants. Still slow, still expensive, still rare, but it laid the foundation for something bigger. For decades, pelvic reconstruction was one of the most difficult problems in orthopedics. Massive bone loss, pelvic discontinuity, failed implants. These were the cases that even made the experienced revision surgeons pause. And among these, Paprosky 3A and 3B defects were the worst of the worst. The kind of defects where you're not just missing bone, the architecture itself is gone. Traditional options were limited: jumbo cups, cages like the Bursch-Schneider anti-protrusio, structural allografts, impaction grafting. All of them worked, sometimes, but none of them worked reliably. The custom triflange acetabular implant changed all of that. Instead of starting with standard cup and adapting it to whatever bone was left, surgeons flipped the idea on its head. Design the implant for the defect that exists today. Built from CT data for one patient only, the triflange has 3 flanges: one on the ilium, one on the ischium, and one on the pubis. Fixed with an average of 15 screws. That gave it rigid, anatomical fixation. And because it bypassed the defect and locked into the healthy bone, The cup could sit exactly where it needed to, restoring the patient's natural hip center, something cages and jumbo cups often couldn't do. This wasn't theoretical. Early Biomet and Techmedica teams pioneered the approach, proving it could work in the clinical space. The results were striking. In initial series, not a single triflange failed in the first 5 years. At the 10-year follow-up, 95% of implants were stable. Harris hip scores improved from around 30 points pre-op to 75 post-op. Even pelvic discontinuities healed, and the complication rates, infection, dislocation, reoperation, were on par with or even better than the cup cage constructs. And now we have data reaching almost 30 years post-op. In one of the longest follow-ups ever published, covering 241 hips implanted between 1992 and 2009, the triflange showed 89% survivorship at a mean of 15 years. Failures were rare, 11.4%, mostly due to recurrent infection or isolated aseptic loosening, often revised to another triflange rather than abandoning the solution altogether. Even with a high-risk population, patients maintain excellent functional outcomes and hip scores decades after implantation. Yes, they were expensive, $13,000 to $20,000, and historically took 6 to 8 weeks to design and build. But when you needed one, there was nothing else like it. And as CT-based digital planning matured, and additive manufacturing entered the picture, turnaround time shortened and cost came down. What was once a one-off salvage idea became practical and repeatable. The triflange became the symbol of customs in orthopedics. Not a research project, not an experiment, a routine, reliable solution for some of the hardest problems in hip reconstruction, and now one of proven durability for nearly 3 decades. Custom implants used to feel like art projects, one-off designs, engineers in machine shops hand-building parts for anatomy they'd never see again. Joe Littman changed all that. At the Hospital for Special Surgery's Biomechanical Engineering Lab under Dr. Tim Wright, he built something rare, an internal design program run by the hospital itself with surgeons and engineers working side by side. If a patient's anatomy was unique, it wasn't a special favor or a one-off and one-time workaround. It was a workflow. Scan, design, prototype, implant. Littman's team worked like an internal device company. Surgeons handed off data in a standardized format. CAD engineers translated clinical needs into a digital model. Prototypes were printed right there in the hospital, so surgeons could rehearse, refine, and finalize their plan before a single incision. This wasn't just theory. They built custom radial heads, distal humeral segments, acetabular replacements, like the one you see behind me. And the results were more than just functional. Less surgical time, better fit, faster recoveries. The real breakthrough came when HSS partnered with Lima Corporate's ProMade division, now part of Innovus, to bring certified, regulatory-compliant additive manufacturing directly on site. Complex revisions that once took months to plan could now be ready in weeks. Surgeons and engineers shared not just a building, but within a workflow. One that connected imaging, planning, and design directly to implant production, without all the back and forth of outsourcing. And it wasn't just HSS. Around the world, hospitals are taking pieces of this model and making them their own. Printing polymer models for surgical rehearsal, designing hybrid lattice implants for oncology resections, using VR and AR to plan complex tumor margins. A pelvic reconstruction case in one recent oncology paper went from scanned to validated prototype in days, with models costing $30 to $50 instead of $500 to $1,000, typical of outsourced solutions. The final titanium implant still came from a certified external printer, but the design, the iteration, that was all in-house. This is what's coming. Hospitals acting like micro-manufacturers, not trying to replace every implant company, but closing the loop between clinical need and engineering solutions fast. The biomechanics lab at HSS showed it could be done. That custom isn't just an emergency solution. It's a system, a repeatable way to solve problems standard implants never could. And HSS proves custom could be integrated into a workflow. The next step was even bolder. What if every patient got a custom implant? Not just the outliers, not just the complex oncology cases. Every knee replacement, every time. That was the idea behind Conformis. Founded in 2004 by radiologist and innovator Dr. Philip Lang, Conformis set out to replace the entire sizing model used in joint replacement today. Instead of picking from 5, 6, or 10 stock sizes, they designed a completely custom implant for each patient. Every time, the workflow was ambitious. A patient would get a CT scan. That data would feed directly into Conformis' proprietary image-to-implant pipeline. CAD models generated a unique implant matched to that patient's anatomy, along with a 3D printed single-use surgical instruments designed to fit only one knee. The whole system came pre-sterilized, packaged, and ready for surgery. The advantages were clear: perfect anatomical match, less bone resection, improved alignment and kinematics, and no need for hospitals to stock dozens of trays of implants in different sizes. And patients noticed the difference. One clinical study comparing Conformis knees to traditional off-the-shelf implants in the same patient, one knee with each, found 72% preferred the Conformis knee, only 6% preferred the standard one, and the rest couldn't tell the difference. Other studies reported 90 to 93% satisfaction rates at a 6-year follow-up, strong functional scores, and pain relief on par with or better than conventional implants. On paper, it looked like the future, but scaling it is another story. Custom knees took more time to plan. Manufacturing costs more. Hospitals had to work around delivery timelines instead of pulling a tray off the shelf. Reimbursement structures weren't built for this level of personalization, and some surgeons simply weren't convinced, preferring the consistency and familiarity of standard implants they'd used for decades. Still, Conformis went public in 2015, raising $135 million and riding a wave of excitement for the custom knee for everyone. But revenue plateaued at $100 million, then dropped to $62 million by 2022. Its stock, once $15 at IPO, fell well below $3. The idea had clinical validation. Patients loved it, but the operational model never scaled the way its founders envisioned. Still, Conformis proved something important. Patients value implants designed for them. Surgeons see the biomechanical advantages when it's done right. But scaling personalization across the entire market has never just been an engineering problem. It's been a problem of logistics, cost, and adoption. The good news? Those are exactly the problems modern technology is finally able to solve. Additive manufacturing is now the engine behind personalization. When Conformis first launched, 3D printing in orthopedics was still a fringe experiment. Today it's routine. We can now fuse titanium powder with high-powered lasers using selective laser melting and laser sintering, or even using electron beams in a vacuum for certain lattice designs. These processes build fully dense, sterilizable implants layer by layer, in shapes so complex they couldn't be machined by traditional methods. What once took several days in a machine shop now takes just a matter of hours. And these aren't generic shapes. They're exact geometries for one patient. Porous titanium lattices are printed to match their remaining bone precisely, while also mimicking trabecular structure to encourage bone ingrowth and long-term biological fixation. The result? Implants that don't just fit better, they heal better. The design process itself has transformed. A decade ago, creating a custom implant was like building a piece of art. Manual segmentation of CT scans, bone modeling, shaping an implant from scratch. That could take days of engineering work for just one part. Today, artificial intelligence automates most of those steps. Algorithms separate bone from soft tissue in seconds. Shape-fitting tools generate implant geometry aligned to the patient's biomechanics, and even auto-create the cutting guides and jigs needed to place it exactly as planned. What once took a week of engineering work can now be done before lunch. And because it's automated, it scales. 1 surgeon, 10 surgeons, 100 surgeons, the process doesn't buckle under its own weight. On the surgical side, planning tools have leapt forward too. Modern systems simulate joint kinematics, predict impingement risk, and model soft tissue balancing before the first incision. Some even let surgeons step into a virtual or augmented reality and rehearse the procedure on a digital twin of their patient. And because these tools are cloud-based, surgeons and engineers can collaborate in real time from anywhere. A design review that once took days of back and forth can now happen in a single afternoon. All of this speed has collapsed turnaround times. Historically, custom implants took 6 to 8 weeks from scan to delivery. Now, with automated design and additive manufacturing, a finished sterilizable implant can arrive in 5 to 10 days. Sometimes even faster for urgent cases. Hospitals no longer need to stock dozens of trays covering every size. They can order exactly what they need when they need it. Even the hospitals themselves are changing. As we just spoke about, major centers like HSS, Mayo Clinic, and Cleveland Clinic have built in-house design labs. They print anatomical models for rehearsal, design patient-specific surgical guides, and even prototype implants all on site. The final titanium implants are still produced in FDA-certified facilities, but the design and validation, that happens right there in the hospital. It's a hybrid model, hospitals acting like micromanufacturers without carrying the full regulatory burden of production. and the regulatory environment itself is clearer than ever. When Conformis started, there was no blueprint for how to classify patient-matched devices. Today, there's a defined playbook. The FDA has a custom device exemption for true one-off devices and a patient-matched device pathway for implants built from templates and adapted to specific anatomy. That clarity removes risks. It gives both companies and hospitals confidence to invest in personalized solutions. The barriers that once made custom implants impractical, slow design, slow manufacturing, unclear regulations, are now disappearing. We can now design automatically, print biologically friendly implants in the exact shape of a single patient, deliver them in days, and do it all under clear regulatory guidance. This isn't experimental anymore. This is infrastructure. The same idea that felt impossible to scale 10 years ago is now just another workflow. And no company illustrates that better than the one that brought Conformis back to life, Restore 3D. Just 2 years ago, Restore 3D acquired Conformis. Not just the product line, not just the brand, but the entire knowledge base of patient-specific design and 100,000 implants of experience. Conformis pioneered personalization, but it struggled with speed, cost, and adoption. Restore 3D was built to solve those exact problems. They brought in fully integrated 3D printing, not as an experiment, but as their primary manufacturing method. They automated imaging and design workflows, the very bottlenecks that slowed Conformis. They built a software platform that turns scans into implant-ready designs in hours, not days, and pushes them straight into a lattice printing system engineered for complex, patient-specific geometry. The result? A knee or a hip designed for one person with biological porosity built in from the start, delivered fast enough to fit into a normal surgical schedule. And Restore 3D isn't the only one changing the landscape. Surgical is doing the same in oncology, tackling massive bone loss and cancer reconstruction, where every defect is one of a kind. They've proven that even the most complex one-off cases can be handled quickly and reliably with custom design. Lima's ProMade division showed what's possible when you go one step further, building point-of-care manufacturing directly inside hospitals. At HSS, their on-site facility proved you can design, print, and deliver custom implants right where the surgery happens. Exactech is taking personalization into shoulders, pairing CT-based planning with patient-specific glenoid implants for severe bone loss, and integrating navigation and AI prediction tools to deliver precision in every case. Custom implants aren't an exotic last resort solution. They're becoming standard tools, faster and easier, and even more integrated than ever before. But Restore 3D stands apart because they're not just solving rare, complex problems. They're aiming to make personalization routine, to bring a custom knee or hip to any patient who needs it without slowing down a hospital, overloading a supply chain, or disrupting a surgeon's workflow. That's why their acquisition of Conformis matters. It's not just expansion, it's a statement. Personalization isn't niche, it's the future, and now we can see it in the data, the studies, the outcomes, the results of personalization at scale. The question everyone asks me is simple. Does personalization and patient specifics actually work? And for the first time, we can confidently say yes, and we can prove it. First, let's talk about how we even measure success in joint replacement. The Knee Society score, or KSS, is one of the gold standards. Think of it as two parts. One for pain, stability, and alignment, and one for how far you can walk or climb stairs in a daily life. It's all scored out of 100. Anything above 80 is excellent. Below that, you may still have pain and limitations. We also use the WOMAC score, which measures pain and stiffness in everyday tasks, and the KUS-JR score, which focuses on quality of life and sports-related activities. Higher is better for KUS-JR, lower is better for WOMAC. Traditional off-the-shelf knees have gotten better over the years. On average, they deliver Knee Society scores in low 80s. That's good, but not the kind of scores that make people forget they ever had knee surgery. Robotic-assisted knees raises that average into the low 90s. That's a meaningful step forward. Robots improve precision and reduce alignment errors. And if you listen to episode 4, you know we love robotics. They are incredible tools, but as we discussed there, robots alone can't solve every problem. They still place a standardized implant built for the average knee into a unique individual patient. That's why patient-specific implants are such a breakthrough. In one multi-center study of cruciate-retaining patient-specific knees, the KSS scores jumped from 41 before surgery to 92 after implantation, and the function score climbed from 53 to 86. Those are scores usually associated with robotic assistance, except here, no robot was used. The implant itself was built to match that one patient, which means it fit naturally and moved naturally from the start. Pain relief was also dramatic. WOMAC scores fell from 49 to 11, all levels of improvement associated with successful knee replacement. Custom knees don't just look good on paper, they move differently. One study compared 3 groups, 1 with custom knees and 2 with conventional off-the-shelf designs, 1 with robotics. The results were striking. Femoral rollback, the way the thigh bone glides back as you bend, was 4 millimeters with custom knees compared to just 2.6 and 0.4 millimeters with off-the-shelf knees. Paradoxical anterior slide, where the femur slides forward instead of back, occurred in only 7% of custom knees, compared to 24 and 48% in the standard design. Axial rotation, which allows a knee to feel more normal as it bends, averaged 5.1 degrees in custom knees, slightly better than the conventional design. This isn't just about motion inside the joint. It's about how the implant sits on the bone. Patient-specific partial knees showed 77% cortical bone coverage, compared to 43% with standard designs on the medial side, and 60% versus 37% on the lateral side. They eliminated anterior overhang altogether, an issue linked to anterior knee pain, and reduced undercoverage from over 3 millimeters down to under 1 millimeter. This means less bone exposed, less impingement, less soft tissue irritation, and a better chance for natural motion. And better mechanics translates to safer recoveries. Across hundreds of knees, transfusion rates dropped from 11% with standard knees to just 2% with custom knees. Adverse events at discharge fell from 14% to 3%, and at 90 days from 18% to 8%. Patients were 5 times less likely to need inpatient rehab and far more likely to go home the day of the surgery or the next day. Even registry data backs this up. The UK National Joint Registry reports a 10-year revision rate of just 1.23% for custom knees, nearly 75% lower than the national average for all total knees. And it's not just knees. In the shoulder, patient-specific instrumentation and custom glenoid implants reduce version and inclination errors to less than 5%, especially in severely deformed shoulders where standard implants often fail. That means better fixation, fewer outliers, and a lower risk of loosening. In spine surgery, Carlsmed's Aprevo platform designs fusion implants customized for each patient's spine curvature. The result? Revision rates dropped from 8.7% to just 1.5%, an 85% reduction. And the adoption is growing fast enough that Medicare created a dedicated reimbursement pathway for personalized spine fusions. Patient-specific implants change the starting point. They do the work of the robot in terms of alignment and fit without the robot. And when you combine the two, a perfect fit implant placed with the perfect precision, the potential for improvement is staggering. These studies tell us something powerful. Personalized implants deliver the same high-end outcomes as robotic-assisted surgery without the robot, and they add unique benefits robots alone can't touch. Natural kinematics, better bone coverage, fewer complications, faster recovery, and lower costs. Personalization isn't a luxury anymore. It's a pathway to safer, faster, better joint replacements today, and a foundation for the next frontier where we combine perfect fit implants with perfect surgical placement and eventually move beyond metal entirely into biologics and tissue engineered joints. But that's next. Here's the kicker though. This level of performance isn't more expensive. It's often cheaper. One study compared 188 total knees, half custom, half standard, and measured everything in the OR. Operating room time dropped from 96 minutes to 85 minutes. Tourniquet time fell from 64 minutes to 55 minutes. Instrument setup went from 12 minutes to just 5, and teardown from 7 to 1.5. And instrument trays, 1 instead of 6. That single change, 1 tray instead of 6, cut sterilization, setup, and logistics enough to save over $1,300 per case. Add fewer complications, faster discharges, and reduced rehab admissions, and a total episode of care savings approached $900 per patient. But even with all this progress, we're still early. We don't yet have the kind of long-term randomized trials that compare patient-specific implants head-to-head with standard ones at scale. We have registry data, and it's promising. We have single surgeon and single center studies showing functional gains and faster recoveries. But what we don't have is the 15-year follow-up, randomized at multiple sites, that says personalized implants don't just work, they last longer. And in orthopedics, lasting longer is the ultimate test. We're also missing something else, reimbursement clarity. Right now, most patient-specific implants are billed like conventional ones. And that's fine for early adoption, but it doesn't reward the very things personalization brings. Fewer trays, shorter operating times, fewer rehab admissions, lower complications. Medicare recognized this for personalized spine implants, creating a dedicated premium pathway. But for knees and shoulders, that pathway isn't clear yet. Until it is, hospital administrators are stuck in the old math equation that doesn't capture these new results. And then there's surgeon education and workflow. Most surgeons were trained to pick from trays, to make an implant fit them, not the other way around. A fully personalized workflow feels different. It starts earlier. Imaging, planning, design sign-off. It removes the ability to just switch sizes on the fly, because there's no tray full of backups. And while the payoff is huge, it requires trust and training. It means giving surgeons new tools and confidence that if something changes mid-surgery, there's still a solution. Cost-benefit clarity is also still evolving. We know the operating room savings, we know the patients leave faster, we know complications drop, but those numbers are often published as case studies, not broad health system analyses. We don't yet have dozens of multi-hospital cost models showing, here's what your system saves in year 1, year 3, year 5. That kind of data is what convinces payers and policymakers to move fast. And finally, scaling partnerships. Making one-off custom implants used to mean long lead times and manual workflows. Today, additive manufacturing and AI planning tools have changed that. But scaling to tens of thousands of cases still means building new networks, distributed manufacturing sites, certified hospital-based design centers, and digital platforms that connect imaging to production seamlessly. That infrastructure is coming, but it's not here everywhere yet. So yes, personalization is working, but proving it beyond doubt means more than great early results. It means long-term, randomized trials. It means reimbursement pathways that reward better outcomes. It means training and confidence for every surgeon, not just early adopters. It means cost models big enough for CFOs and payers to see the full picture. And it means building a supply chain and software backbone that scales to match the vision. That's what's missing today, and that's what will unlock the future. Because once those pieces are in place, personalized implants won't just be better, they'll be standard. But personalization doesn't stop with metal. It's already moving towards biology. One of the clearest examples, the BioRSA technique in reverse shoulder arthroplasty. Instead of relying only on metal augments or allograft bone harvested from somewhere else, surgeons performing BioRSA take the patient's own humeral head, bone that would normally be discarded, and graft it into the glenoid to restore volume and alignment. It's decentralized personalization. A tissue-based solution designed in real time during the surgery for one unique patient. And it works because it combines everything we've talked about in this episode: surgeon discretion, custom mechanical alignment, and biologic integration. Living bone healing to living bone. It shows that personalization isn't a trend, it's an evolution. We started by adapting the implants to match each patient's anatomy. Now we're using their own tissue to improve stability and longevity. And it begs the question, if we can custom build with metal and bone, what happens when we can build with cells? That's where we're heading next. Episode 6 dives deep into biologics and tissue engineering, what's already possible, what's in development, and how one day a joint replacement might not be printed at all, but grown. Before we close, let's take one last look at where we've been today. We saw how custom implants have moved from rare salvage cases to routine surgeries, knees, shoulders, and even spines. We looked at data showing better function, fewer complications, and lower costs, and admitted what's still missing: long-term trials, reimbursement clarity, and the infrastructure to make personalization the standard everywhere. And we saw why personalization isn't a luxury, it's the only logical path forward. Because precision doesn't matter if the implant isn't built to fit. From choosing the best size to designing the only one that fits. This is the turning point. And next time, we ask, what happens when we grow the implant instead of manufacturing it? This is Unstandardized Built for One. Thank you for listening.